here yet, so I think we'll start with the program and we'll slot them in afterwards. No? Okay, so Elizabeth is here, so we'll wait a couple of minutes if you don't mind. So we'll kick off in a couple of minutes. Thanks. If you're already seated, folks, can I ask you to just come forward so that if we have any latecomers, they can fill up the back seats. So if you wouldn't mind, I know nobody wants to be in the front. Please come towards the front so we can just fill up the chairs, and then the empty chairs will be at the back for those who come a little bit late. So thanks. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Let me just introduce myself quickly. I'm Stephen Grusd, and I work here at the South African Institute of International Affairs. I work on our African Governance and Diplomacy program, and I've also recently been doing work on Russia, Africa. So as you can imagine, the last 5 months have been pretty busy trying to understand what's happening in that part of the world. We're delighted to welcome you here for our careers event. This is one of the first major events we've had live back in this hall, which used to be full on a weekly basis. So we're really excited that we can get back to having people at the Institute. And we are also going out on Facebook and it's being broadcast remotely as well today. So we're very excited about that. This is a project that our Kassai scholars do on an annual basis. It's one of the events that they put on, and it's really a great learning curve, and at the end I'll thank them, but just to say now they've done a wonderful job in bringing you a very exciting afternoon. I'm going to first introduce Cynthia on my left, Cynthia Chigwenya, who serves as the African Union's youth representative for Southern Africa, and she's also a program coordinator at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. She's a former Kassai scholar, so it's welcome back, and we're having a number of those today. And she holds an MA in Development Studies and an MPhil in Social Policy and Development. So, Cynthia, I'll ask you to make a couple of opening remarks from Kassai's perspective. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to say this again. Good afternoon, everyone. Great. Now we have a bit of energy in the room. My name is Cynthia Chigwenya. I am a former Kassai scholar, and I'm really excited to be back at Sire, where sort of my journey started from. And I really hope that from the participants that we have today, we'll have a number of people being selected for the scholarship next year. I was hoping that the head of our program for Kassai will be here to do these remarks. So I didn't prepare much, but maybe what I can share with you, because I managed to engage with some of you before the program started. And someone said to me, does the scholarship pay well? It pays, and you can leave very well as a student. But I think when you're applying for the scholarship, what you need to look at is what are the opportunities that I will get from the scholarship outside the finances. And for me, Sire was that institution that allowed me to not just work with Kassai as an organization, but allowed me to publish policy briefs. When I started off, I was very much on the African Union and African institutions. And I was fortunately or unfortunately placed on economic diplomacy. And I remember going in there and thinking, what on earth am I going to be talking about? Or what is this whole climate change business infrastructure all about? But it is interesting now that as I've started off my career, development issues are intertwined. I'm now in peace and security, and you find that there's conflicts that are actually induced by climate risks, that there's contestations for resources. So when you get this position, if you do, or even if you join an organization that is not Sire, don't just think of the finances, think of the opportunities. Does it develop you as an individual? Does it give you a different perspective? Does it allow you to contribute to the community and society you live in and change lives? And I think that on its own has been very fulfilling for me, not just in Kassai capacity, but also in the African Union capacity, where I get to represent several youth in the region to the African Union. And I think that's enough. Thank you, Steve.
Cynthia, can you give us one line on what Kassai is if people are just not familiar with the organization?
All right. Thank you so much again. I think that's the one question I got wrong when I did my interview. So I remember that very well. Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a German political foundation. We are based in Dunkeld here in Johannesburg. And most of our work is really on promoting democracy, good governance. And one of our flagship programs is the Kassai Scholarship, which is in partnership with the South African Institute of International Affairs. And this is really investing in the next generation of leaders to say, how do you get the requisite experience while you're also earning your master's degree from the Wits University, Stellenbosch, University of Western Cape, and be able to sort of a foot in the door experience where you still get your degree, but you also have some work experience. And I think that will allow you to get into the workforce with more skills and more capabilities and capacities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cynthia. It's my honor to introduce Elizabeth Cedaropolis, the Chief Executive of Sire. She's been in this position since 2005 and is a world-renowned scholar on South African foreign policy, and African organizations, aid effectiveness, and Africa's engagement with the rest of the world. So Elizabeth, this is your opportunity to say a few words.
Right, thank you. I think I'm going to stand, if you don't mind. Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies that I was a little late coming back from Pretoria, and I know you waited a few minutes so that we didn't start punctually at 3 o'clock. But just to welcome you all to the Institute, those that are physically here, and of course those who are online. This is indeed great to have people back in this hall after 2 years, I think, of careers events that were done pretty much virtually, right? So it's really good to actually see people physically. The other point to make about this event specifically is that this has a long history. At the Institute. It is a partnership with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and it's longer than I've been in this position. So that's saying quite a bit. And it's always organized by that year's Kassai Scholars. So it's an opportunity for them to put into practice their logistical and organizational, as well as thinking skills, because any event is not just about the logistics, it's about also how you conceptualize, how you put together the program and what you want to get out of it at the end of the day. This event, as Cynthia mentioned, is part of a partnership between the Institute and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung that goes back to before 1999, I think, and is the Kassai Scholars are the earliest manifestation of the partnership, which actually did kick off in 1999, the scholarship. But it's also, we have a research partnership, a dialogue partnership with the foundation, engaging in many of the themes that the foundation, I think, works in democracy, in governance, media, issues around global governance, and not only with the office here in South Africa, but indeed with offices that they have around the world. So it's always good to be able to talk about a partnership that is over 2 decades long and is mutually beneficial and reinforcing. I think what is also important to note in the context of this careers event here today and the Kassai Scholarship is that I think both of our organizations are really committed to focusing on cultivating, encouraging, empowering young people in our society. We recognize that, and I can say that now, I'm no longer a young person, unfortunately, but you guys, I'm told I should also not say you guys are the future. I must say that you guys are the present, okay? And you are, because many of you are already playing leadership roles in various fields. Cynthia is a good example of that, who is youth. You are a children, as the advert goes. Really, young people are moving into spaces, being innovative, being creative, getting the older generations really to rethink their paradigms and rethink what works and what doesn't work, what is important and what isn't important. And so that's absolutely critical, and it shakes us older people, but it's good that it does that, okay? Because that's how you get progress. This particular event, which has, as I said, been going on for a number of years, is also intended to create, to show people who are just coming out of university or thinking of going into postgraduate studies, what are the opportunities around work. And I think, you know, people in their 20s and in the early 20s who are just finishing and about to launch their career. I mean, you're coming into the work environment, I think, at a turning point, not only personally, but also in terms of where the world is. And specifically, I'm talking here about the significant technological changes, the issues of artificial intelligence that all of us sort of are a little apprehensive about what that might mean for the workplace. You're also coming into a work environment where the economics are not what they were maybe 10 or 15 years ago, certainly before the financial crisis of 2008, and that creates its own set of challenges in terms of employment. And if you look at the stats that are produced by international organizations around employment, particularly after COVID, some of the statistics are quite stark. So any platforms and any opportunities that enable you to be ahead of the curve in terms of when you draw up your CV, I think are opportunities really to be grabbed with both hands. This is intended then to give you a little bit of a taste of that. If some of you decide to apply for the Kassai Scholarship, I think that is another opportunity. I cannot emphasize more what Cynthia has said about, it's not just about the money. Absolutely, you need to be able to put bread on the table. That's critical, and buy your school books. But what I think is even more important is the opportunities that allow you to move to that next level. And I think if we look at our alumni of this program over the last 23 years, I think it's very clear that it's really been extremely beneficial and rewarding, I think, both to them, but also to us, sort of looking at where those interns of yesteryear are today. So let me stop there. Let me just also from my side thank the panelists that you guys, the interns, selected to speak to us today and to inspire us. And I would like to reach out to all of you and say, stay in touch with the Institute. Some of you might also be familiar with our Youth at Sire program, which is also about enabling, about getting young people to be involved in one of the most critical issues of our time, that of climate change. You've already alluded to the threats associated to that, but also with the huge opportunities if we really all believe in our own agency and don't expect others to be our agents. So let me stop there and hand over to the moderator. Do you guys want us to continue sitting here?
No, I think
Okay,
you can leave. Thank you very, very much to both Elizabeth and Cynthia. The theme of today and what we've asked our keynote speaker to touch on is diplomacy and development in the digital age, civil society as an influencer or influenced. I think it's a bit of both. Civil society is both creating content and on the receiving end of content. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Bob Mckessa, who is the Deputy Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States, based here at Wits University. He's a distinguished academic and researcher. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Nairobi and a master's and doctorate from the Communication University of China, Beijing. He works in the Wits Journalism and Media Studies program and has interests on good governance in Africa, public diplomacy. He's recently co-edited a special edition of our South African Journal of International Affairs looking at digital diplomacy in Africa. And other areas that he looks at are international communication, diplomacy with a focus on digital and public diplomacy, the African diaspora, and the emergence of cities. So Dr. Mckessa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Elizabeth, and Sire colleagues, as well as the audience, the fellows, young scholars here today. I think I'll launch straight into the discussion without further ado, introductions having been made. And it is that we've experienced a very fast pace of technological change over the past couple of years. At least over 3 decades. I think what we refer to as the digital revolution is often pinpointed to have started in the mid-1980s, but gathered pace in the early 1990s. But when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the change was even faster. In fact, we call it a digital surge, which then suggests that society has changed quite a bit. These technologies have been transformational, therefore, so much so that we in fact now use the term fourth industrial revolution. And it's exactly that we are in a new era, not just because these technologies help us to understand and work in very different ways from the way societies lived a couple of years back. But they are very fast-paced, so that even as we speak now, one of the things you notice when we started this discussion is, the voice over there saying recording in progress. This is not something we are used to until the pandemic hit. And if you look back only 2 years back, many of us had no idea what Zoom or Google Meet or Teams was. Now it is standard practice. And so I think the World Economic Forum specifically in 2016 came up with the coinage of the term Fourth Industrial Revolution to capture the fact that these are not just changes, but they are extremely fast-paced. And I'll come to what that means therefore for young scholars. But before I do that, I just wanted to then also go back to say, this is not the first revolution on a global scale, on a societal scale, because these digital revolutions are happening everywhere globally. In the past, some of these revolutions will start in Europe, perhaps, and be stuck there. But this time around, they are planetary, they are global, so that you have even one of the poorest countries in the world, like Burundi. People are pretty much, at home with the use of the internet, with the use of mobile telephony. You can Zoom with anybody in Bujumbura, even though their GDP is one of the lowest in the world, or and stuff like that. And that you can actually engage with colleagues in Japan or Papua New Guinea or Peru. So that's the global nature of this particular revolution. Because when you think of the third industrial revolution, which was essentially based on energy and particularly electricity, it started out in England, it spread throughout Europe, landed in the US, but it took time to land on the African continent. And in fact, some people still argue that on the African continent, we are still in the agrarian revolution because we need to organize our food production systems to start with. But with the fourth industrial revolution, every part of the world has been touched, even though we talk of digital divide. But this is digital divides only with respect to certain technologies, but not all technologies. Take mobile telephony. Courtesy, thanks to fairly affordable devices produced in a part of China called Guangzhou, southern part of China. Anybody can go to Braamfontein now and get a smartphone for as little as 500 Rand. And therefore the widespread nature of these technologies. And so this is the current revolution, whether you want to call it a fourth industrial revolution, or whether you want to say fourth industrial revolution is cliche, is not a term that I want to use. I want to just say digital revolution or ICT, information communication technologies. The understanding is that it's extremely fast paced and it's global reach. Now, I think that then brings us to what does that mean for scholarship in the 21st century? Because I think we can actually do an assignment here and ask colleagues in the room to say, give us examples of the digital technologies that you think have just surfaced over the last 2 years. And we can give many examples, and I'm sure you have many examples. But what is more important now is what does that mean for academia, for scholarship, for careers? And I think that's what I want to go to as I come to move towards the conclusion. One is that for scholars who are not like myself and Elizabeth, who went to school a few decades ago, you have no choice but leverage digital technologies in your studies, in your research, in your work. So if you are struggling with setting up a Zoom meeting with your lecturer, or if you do not know how to use Scopus, which is a citation style, or if you simply can't figure out how to get the latest publication in your field. For us in communication studies, for example, if you're not accessing literature from Communicatio, for example, which is a high impact journal. If you have a challenge accessing those, because all of those are now online. If you have a challenge using technologies, you need to up your game because you will be left behind. It is, and if you're not also, sharing some of your publications on LinkedIn, because I'm saying this because of Cynthia, I know that she shouts quite a bit about her more recent publications and so forth, then you are not going to be noticed and so forth. If you can't make a difference between Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, because these are all social media, for example, but they operate on different kind of technologies and they target different audiences and so forth. So I think generally all that is wrapped in what we call digital literacy. So digital literacy, there's a lot of literature online. You need to be digitally literate to be able to study, to do research, to write. I hope most of you use Grammarly, for example, to do your editing work. Obviously, we don't want you to over-rely on Grammarly. It's supposed to assist you only up to a certain extent, but you need to understand your English, to have good grammar and so forth. But having Grammarly helps quite a bit. And so one point for scholarship going forward in this era is really having digital literacy so that you can be able to be effective in your studies. Number two, and I think we are at Sire, and Sire is sometimes considered a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary institution or think tank. And I think what the digital revolution has meant is that you can't be comfortable only in one discipline. You can't say, no, look, I'm a media and journalism scholar, or international politics scholar, or I'm a sociologist, or I'm a geographer, and stop there. And I think this just takes us back to the fact that the digital revolutions that we are experiencing today are societal and society-wide, meaning that being stuck in one discipline does not give you the capacity, the room, the leverage to see what is possible in other fields. And in terms of interdisciplinarity, your capacity to connect ideas from geography, for example, to history. Yeah, you can even talk of the history of geography, but the geography of history, for example, is very important. And I think it was mentioned by Steve when I was when he was introducing me, that recently I did some work with a colleague who was initially working here, Yarik Triamsky, and we worked on digital diplomacy, a special issue with the South African Journal of International Affairs. This was very much interdisciplinary because we are working innovatively with ideas that link media and international relations, where diplomacy sits. And that's the nature of it. When you have a revolution that goes beyond one field, you can be anchored in one field, but you need to have working knowledge in various other fields. Okay, so then we come to my last point on scholarship, and I'll stop there, is that because of the fast pace, because of the surge in these technologies, one has to update their knowledge much more frequently than we used to do in our time when we are still younger. People are publishing daily in their thousands, and people are publishing in various platforms. So to stay, you have to be on the cutting edge, as it were, meaning that you have to update your knowledge almost continuously. And again, not just from one platform. Social media is as important as a journal article, as an edited book volume, as an article in a newspaper, and so forth. But it means that, for example, when you are setting up your project, you want to do a research project, usually a research report at WITS, or a thesis, for a master's thesis. You set out your topic, but you must understand that things can change in the course of just 1 year, so that your research questions actually also need to shift. And therefore, if your methodological and theoretical frameworks are stuck in one particular period, you might actually move ahead and find that your questions are no longer relevant. So I think this is what we call being futuristic. In fact, the whole idea of future of work is based on that this is an era where change is so fast that we always have to cast an eye on the horizons. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Mckessa. We've got a little something for you. And just to excuse Dr. Mckessa, he does have another meeting, but we will have time for 1 or 2 questions. So Laura, do you want to give it? Thank you very much.
All right.
Yep. And in this age, we bump this, we don't shake hands anymore. Yeah, it made me think your talk about, there's a lot of talk, and we know what software is, and we know what hardware is, and the combination of those. but there's another term, and that's wetware. And we are wetware. We are people who are wet. We live, we thrive. And how do we engage in this ever-changing world? Are there any questions from the audience that you'd like to put to Dr. Mckessa? Please raise your hands and we'll come to you with a roving mic. Don't be shy. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. The question I have for you, Say, is that how do we prepare societies into moving to their fourth IR now, considering that some places or communities are not that privileged to have access to technologies and etc. So which role do we play to make sure that people are prepared to the new era we're going into? And yeah, how do we prepare them to just get into this new era of fourth IR? Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I think if we've learned one thing over the last 2 years, it's how important data is. Not just big data, small data that's on your phone and how expensive it is in this country, but that's another story for another day. There was a question over here, and then we'll just close it there because we do have a time constraint. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah, good day. So Doc, I wanted to get your whole understanding, or where do we, I think it's piggybacking on what my colleague just said, the idea of the digital literacy versus the digital divide. Because I think those are, in my understanding, those are two worlds apart. And then how do we come and merge them as it gets?
Thank you.
Right, I think that's a tough question because one, it links to issues of policy and governance. And so a good response perhaps is one that links that to advocacy, the need for, and I think one of the topics we have here is the impact of technologies on civil society. I think the question of digital divide can be sorted out by corporate organizations, your MTNs, Vodacom, and so forth. It can be sorted out by communities investing in technologies and so forth. But they can only scratch the surface. The corporates exist for profit. They are capitalistic by definition. Civil society organizations can campaign and do what they want. But if governments are moved, then we don't get very far. So I think the onus remains on governments to invest heavily in ICT infrastructure. There's something called net neutrality, for example, and debt justice, for example. And these are undertakings that only governments that are futuristic, that understand the huge benefits and the multiplier effect of ICTs have undertaken. And so it almost boils back down to specific administrations, governments, and even regional organizations, the African Union, for example, to come up with policies that help bridge the digital divide. And I think in so doing, I think countries that are forward-looking will always want to look at their peers, other countries that have done well. Nordic countries generally have very high levels of internet penetration. And if you look at their living standards, they're also extremely very high. On the African continent, I think South Africa does well to some extent. A country like Kenya does well to some extent. A country like Ghana does very well to some extent. But a big country, for example, Nigeria, and I hope there's no Nigerian in the audience, you have a huge challenge because internet penetration beyond Lagos and Abuja is almost non-existent. And when you look at the level of living in a country such as that, it becomes problematic. A country such as Rwanda has done very well because also it's a very connected country and they don't suffer blackouts, what we call load shedding. Which is another cause for digital divide, by the way. And so I think that if governments and societies understand that heavy investment in ICT helps to advance, because we are in gig economies and digital economies are reliant on internet access and other ICTs. I'll stop there. But I think a related matter is that digital divide sometimes can actually come with what people are coining a phrase to say digital political divide. We've seen issues of surveillance, for example, internet blockades, in countries such as Zimbabwe, in countries such as Uganda, in countries such as Tanzania. When there is contestation, when the elections are about, internet is just knocked out for a period of time, or the capabilities of internet for development are reversed so that you start surveilling and following citizens and denying them their rights. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Mckessa. We have a very tight program, so if you'd like to leave the podium, that would be acceptable. And thank you. Give him another hand, please. So we're now going to move on to our panel discussion. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who's going to be joining us virtually. She was a Cass Scholar at Sire. Her name is Clifford, and she did the Cass Scholarship, and then a couple of years later, she did so well that we hired her back, and she worked with me on our Russia-Africa work, and then she has subsequently gone back to become the deputy chief editor at Africa Check, which is a fact-checking service, making sure that politicians and others are held accountable for what they put forward as facts. And so, Kaylee, I hope you are out there in internet land, and welcome, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. Hi to everyone. It's such a pleasure to be joining in the conversation this afternoon. It's also a bit surreal for me. As you've heard, I was a Cass Scholar in 2018, and one of my jobs while interning at Sire was to organize the Cass Careers event. Last year, I moderated the event, and this year I have the pleasure of joining as a speaker. So it definitely feels like a bit of a full circle moment. So I've been asked to speak today a little bit about my personal career journey and starting back from my student years. As I was thinking back in preparation for this address, I tried really hard to find the invisible string that ties it all up in a neat package. But I think the story of how I got to where I am is a little messier than that, and I'll explain why. So in 2013, I arrived at UKZN with dreams of a career in international relations. I chose political science, legal studies, and German as my majors, thinking that this would provide me with a good foundation, and it did. But I actually really struggled to find a job after I graduated, and I was at home for a couple of months, not doing much. Now, I'm a fact checker by profession, so I wanted to share this fact with you. A third of graduates aged 15 to 24 in South Africa are unemployed. So I did the only other thing that I could think to do at the time, which was to go back to university and study further. This was only really possible because of the marks that I had gotten in my undergrad, and so UKZN offered to pay for my honours degree. So I enrolled for the International Relations Program, but it was also during this year that I really started to network in earnest. So I started a LinkedIn page for myself. I participated in extracurricular debates. I joined youth at Sire, and this really helped me to start mapping who's who in the field. I started to realize that there was more than just one option available to me as an IR graduate. So I think that many of us go into IR thinking that we'll become a diplomat or we'll work for the UN, and those are really, really wonderful goals. But I just began to realize that there was so much more out there. But again, even with my good marks, I struggled to find a position. I felt overqualified for some, but I didn't have enough experience for others. By this stage, I had worked on the cash desk at my local Truworths as a fundraiser for the Worldwide Fund. And as an English high school tutor. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with either of these jobs. It just wasn't, what I had pictured for myself as a university graduate. Here's another fact. Out of the 11 million people who have applied for SASSA's 350 Rand social relief of distress grant, 500,000, so 500,000, are youth with a tertiary qualification. My first really big break came when I applied for the Kassai Scholarship and was invited for an interview. I remember spending hours on the Sire website, just learning about the staff and reading up on the most recently published research, just trying to understand what the organization was about and the work that they do. And I think that's what ultimately landed me the job. That was really a wonderful year of practical hands-on work experience while also studying towards my master's degree. And things really started to pick up from there. When my internship ended, I took a position as a researcher at Icrc, which is the continent's leading fact-checking organization. I knew nothing about fact-checking, but I was really intrigued by this idea of researching claims that are made in the public domain and publishing reports on them as a means to hold government accountable, but also to try and bring an element of accuracy to public debate. You see, the world of work was changing, and the emergence of digital technologies made fact-checking not just a possibility, but a necessity, because fake news isn't anything new, but social media has amplified its reach, and new digital technologies have made it more sophisticated than ever. And at Icrc, we don't even like to use the term fake news because the false content that we see spreading online is so much more than just one term can describe. So it's misinformation, disinformation, hoaxes, manipulated content, fabricated content, deep fakes. And all of this is making it really difficult for ordinary citizens to decipher between what's real and what's not, ultimately restricting our rights to accurate information. And when people don't have access to accurate information and can't make informed decisions about their lives, the consequences of that are potentially life-threatening. This is especially the case when it comes to health misinformation. So COVID-19 is a prime example where real lives were affected by claims like African people can't contract COVID because of their DNA, or that children should not be vaccinated against COVID-19 because it leads to heart problems. Fact-checking misinformation like this has also become trickier as people move away from mainstream forms of media and onto more closed or encrypted end-to-end platforms like WhatsApp and Telegram. Because how do you begin to try and improve accuracy in public debate if you don't even know what information is being shared? So new digital technologies have also actually forced us to be more creative in the way that we address the challenge of false information. And this has led to some really exciting, innovative projects involving media literacy, interactive radio dramas, and podcasts specifically for WhatsApp. This last project is one that I'm particularly proud of. If you're in a neighborhood WhatsApp group or you have family that's of an older generation, you'll know that misinformation is a huge problem on WhatsApp. But because of WhatsApp's privacy rules, we don't have access to some of the most viral misinformation. So we set up a WhatsApp line where people are free to send us messages that they think could be false. And twice every month, we debunk those in a voice note show. We send it back to you on WhatsApp. It's under 7 minutes long, which means that it doesn't eat too much of your data to listen to. And it's in a forwardable format, which means that you can pass it on as you would a regular WhatsApp message. So it's responding directly to some of the challenges that we have with WhatsApp. And the response to that has been overwhelmingly positive. I'm going to stop there because this is something I could talk about all afternoon. But in short, I think that the digital revolution has created both challenges and opportunities. It has pulled me into a field that I had no intention of joining, but for which I have so much passion. And that really brings me to my recommendations or advice for young people that are looking to enter the job market. Because we know all too well the challenges of being a young person in this country. And if hard work were enough, we would all be guaranteed a job in the field that we studied. So number one is just be kind to yourself. And if you have to change your plans along the way, that's fine. Number two is to build relationships and networks that withstand time. It was through doing this that I've been able to continue participating in projects around international relations that I'm still really passionate about, even though I'm now in a completely different line of work. Number 3, you can learn pretty much anything once you have the job, but it's a positive attitude that is what's going to get your foot in the door. And then lastly, I think just being open to different opportunities, especially if it's something that you wouldn't ordinarily consider or that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. If you are looking to do your master's, I would really recommend applying for the Kassai Scholarship. It's without a doubt what kickstarted my career. And at Icrc, we also have opportunities for those of you in journalism. For example, we run a fellowship program once a year where we invite young journalists to come and spend a couple of weeks at our newsroom in Johannesburg and learn the ins and outs of fact checking. So I'll definitely share the details of those in the chat. But yeah, I think just being open to new possibilities and opportunities. I'll end on one last kind of motivational fact. I think the maths checks out, but I do think it's true that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Thanks.
Panelist, Barend Lutz, who's the co-founder of Voxcroft, and we'll learn what Voxcroft does. He's very active in the digital space. He works with private industry, business development, analytics, big data, and he's explored how big data and machine learning can further the fields of political security risk analysis and population-centric intelligence. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll learn both about his professional and personal journey. So Barend, over to you.
Thanks, Stephen, and thank you, Sire and Cass, for inviting me. Really glad to be here and really glad to see all of you. Let me just share my screen here. I have a quick presentation that I'd like to share. See if that's working. All right, I wanted to start off with just an interview question that I know Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, always asks. He says, what is the important truth that very few people agree with you on? I always think that's a good interview question. You might get it one day, so it's something to think about. The one I like that he also proposed is the question of conventions, secrets, and mysteries. He had this idea that there's still secrets out there to explore, and in the humanities, I think we are at the forefront of being able to explore it. What he means here with conventions, secrets, and mysteries is he's saying there's conventions, that's stuff that everybody knows, and it's not that interesting. There's mysteries, you can't solve them, they're unsolvable. But then there are the hard questions, the secrets that can still be found. And I think that is what we do in humanities, in social science. And I'll tell you a little bit about my career of like, it's my career and my company is at this integration between humanities, social sciences, and data science and AI. And I'll tell you a little bit about that and show how I think we have a very cool opportunity. We are explorers to find these secrets. I started my career doing my master's at Stellenbosch in international relations. I had to fight my professor on doing something that does machine learning and international relations together. I wanted to see, can you measure people's opinion on democracy from Twitter? So I joined the engineering department, had some of my engineering friends help me, joined the media lab that they had running in Stellenbosch, and then downloaded, this was in 2011, so right in the middle of the Arab Spring, downloaded hundreds of thousands of tweets, all focused on democracy, and then hope that the machine can help me sort it out into people who like democracy and who don't like democracy. It wasn't that easy. I had to hand code, like what you see there, all the little dots, those are each separate tweets that I had to hand code, 100,000 of them, because the machine wasn't good enough. This made me very upset, but it also showed me that there's I mean, the machine was okay. It just wasn't good enough yet, and the machines are getting better. And that's what I can tell you about further what my company is doing at the moment. After this, I wrote a book on this topic with Professor Pierre de Tooy from Stellenbosch University, just showing that there's this Habermasian public sphere where, I mean, you all know the social media is becoming more and more important, and that is where the conversation is happening, but actually having a real world impact. Today it's everything from, we talked about WhatsApp all the way to TikTok. And that is where our argument was the public sphere, the most important conversations that's influencing real world change is happening in this sphere. And that's what you should be listening to. And that's where you find the voice of the people that I'll get to. After this, I got recruited into like a way different field. And I think this is what the other, my colleagues also talked about. You need to be willing to, like, in our industry, be multidisciplinary and just jump in where you are needed. I got recruited into political security risk analysis, working on an ops floor in Cape Town for a company called Red 24. We did, like, you had to do like shift work, and then my area was the whole of Latin America, and you come there at 10 o'clock at night and you leave 6 o'clock in the morning, and you have to like look at all of social media, all of news, everything, and then like find explosions and protest events and quickly alert. And then you have clients calling saying, hey, I'm on an airplane in Karachi and there's a bomb, what should I do? And you're there as like a just finished your master's degree, you're like, I guess let me help you. It was like really throwing you into the fire, like from the frying pan into the fire. But what I saw there is like they used human analysts to do machine work. They had us sit there and look through like Twitter's like flowing down. I was like, this is not how it should be. The human element should say why and because of what, not what is happening. And I'll get to that. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. After that, the US government, somebody there found my book that I published and then recruited me. And they were like, oh, we're doing work on open source intelligence in Africa, and they did basically exactly the same stuff I did in my thesis, which was can you measure what's going on in the world from social media? I joined the global team. Was really privileged to travel the world with them, and then Trump got elected, and they didn't want foreign nationals, so a big part of us was, well, not one. It's more complicated than that. A large part of our organization got retrenched and lost our jobs. But there was this massive group of really intelligent people all across the globe that I've made good connections with. And we decided, let's start a company and do the same thing that we were doing for them. So the US government became our first client for Voxcroft Analytics. We started the company in 2018 with just about 5 of us. Grew it out. It's about 70 full-time employees at the moment. We have like about 300 contractors all around the world also working for us. And what we are doing is we're doing open source intelligence, looking at everything that is happening around the world from an open source media perspective. And then what I mentioned is that interaction between humans and machines, we're bringing that together. So our team is split up into a big data science team with cosmologists and mathematicians and AI specialists on the one side, helping us create the tools that makes it easier for the analysts to not sit there and scroll through Twitter the whole day, and like actually being able to use what you studied in your master's. I'll go through it very quickly. So what I saw as at Voxcroft, we have these 5 pillars. It's what's going on, why is it happening, what's the impact outlook, and what do we recommend to our clients. That what part is the part that the machine is taking over completely at the moment. As soon as a tweet flows out, my machine, our AI picks it up and alerts you on it. And then slowly but surely, we are working towards having the machine take over more and more of this and freeing up the analysts to do what they do best. Just to show, I won't go into detail here, just a couple of the projects we do at the moment. So we look also at mis and disinformation across Africa and across the world. This is a specific project where we look at hate speech, show trends and how real world events and social media events track up. You can find on our blog, voxcroft.com, you'll find more information on this. One of my colleagues did a study on TikTok recently, just showing how, so when I was in university, Twitter was the main place, TikTok is becoming the main place for this type of communication right now. We've done work in South Africa and Nigeria also on COVID vaccinations and how people are spreading misinformation and how sentiment is changing around COVID vaccinations in Africa. I'll end off just on saying the attributes of success. If you'd ask me what I'm looking for when I'm hiring someone, it's that need to explore. Like, you really want to be able to like find out what's going on, what's the real truth. You have to be able to thrive in change in our industry. We've all learned this in COVID. Because of that, you also have to be self-motivated. So this internal locus of control where you need to really want it and it needs to come from the inside. Multidisciplinary, I think, I mean, I'm biased here, but I advocate for all social scientists to also learn a bit of data sciences, just enough to be dangerous. Like, you just need to be able to ask the right questions. And then the most important one, I think, is passion. Passion is going to get you through the door, get you the job. We do have opportunities at Voxcroft, so you can check out our blog or you can go to the site. But yeah, thank you very much.
Wow, that was really, really fascinating. I don't know if it's because we have a German partner on this project, but we really are running well to time today, which is unusual. But thank you. That was just quite inspiring and mind-blowing at the same time. So thanks so much, Byron. Our last speaker on the panel is Matebe Chisiza, and Matebe is also a CAS alumna. And in fact, she loved CAS so much that she did it for 2 years. She did both her honors and her master's. She got special permission to be with us for 2 years. So it was 2017 and 2018. And then 2016, 2017, sorry. And then Matebe went to work for the Swiss embassy in Pretoria. And she's now, let me get the title right. She is now, wait, I'm on the wrong page. It's a long one. Here we go. She's now the country manager in public and private partnerships for the Southern African region of the International Committee for the Red Cross. Over to you, Matebe.
Thank you so much, Steve, and everyone here today. Can you all hear me properly? Great. And, you know, every time I love coming to Sire events, I find like I have a new partner. So I'm going to be contacting Baron about some of their technological work. Thanks again. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, students, graduates, excellencies, all protocol observed. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Steve. I'm humbled and really think of you highly as well in that esteem. Whenever I come back to Sire, I always feel like I'm coming back home. I've been here, like Steve mentioned, in many different capacities. And for me, the Sire CAS opportunity introduced me to a whole new world I thought was inaccessible. And not just that, it showed me the great capacity of African institutes, academic and research centers on the continent. We lack nothing short of talent on the continent. I would also like to thank especially the South African Institute of International Affairs for this invitation, as well as the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for this invitation and opportunity. Like Steve mentioned, my name is Matebe Chisiza, and I'm currently the country manager of public and private partnerships at the International Committee of the Red Cross in Southern Africa. But before that, I'd like to take you a little back of my journey and where it all started. So I was born in Zambia. I briefly lived in Zimbabwe and spent my formative years growing up in Botswana, high school again in Zambia, and now having been in South Africa for over a decade. I often joke that I really look forward to that Africa or SADC passport if it comes out. And one thing I can say is, you know, despite our different cultures, languages, ethnicities, at the core, we all want the same thing: the end of poverty, dignity and prosperity of all peoples in our communities, and a safe environment for us and our children. I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship and did my first degree in political science in Jacksonville University in Florida, USA. So while there, I took advantage of various courses, internships, and because I was still not quite sure what I wanted to do, actually, I did law school for my first semester. I took multiple jazz and theater courses and quickly realized that is not for me. So switched as well. But the lesson that I took out of that was, don't be afraid to explore other avenues. Like my colleagues have mentioned, it's okay if your passions change. I think that's part of growth. I think it's also part of learning. When I came back to South Africa, I was quite lost and confused and had no idea of what sorts of jobs are out there for someone with a political science and a social science background. And it wasn't always clear. So I started where most people did at the time, LinkedIn and other career platforms, and even Facebook, now Meta. I briefly worked for a tech company as a data capture. And then on one fateful day on a Facebook post, I saw a Kassai advertisement for a position. I reached out and explained my situation, followed up with an email to Ketiwe, who responded quite quickly as well. And after, of course, having done a lot of my own research on how best to prepare, I was able to apply for this position. Like Steve mentioned, what really drew me as well to apply for this was the focus on Africa, was the focus of growing expertise on the continent, which, like I said, I really believe exists in different capacities. But I had another hurdle. At the time, the scholarship program only accepted master's students, and I was technically an honor student. So I actually remember the interview with Dr. Dix at the CAS offices. We met in the garden for what felt like hours, and I solved my case as to why I thought I would be best suited for this role. And thankfully, I remain grateful they were able to support me in my honors and master's program as well. And after that, I came back, but still, the imposter syndrome remained within even the Sire CAS role. And what I quickly realized was I had a great support system in my colleagues, with Stephen, with Yarek, who often advised me and pushed me to write new pieces, challenged my communication capacity to speak on radio, to speak online. I think that was excellent experience for me. But also colleagues like Luanda, who encouraged me to think outside of the box and outside of my own experiences. That really helped for me. And I do believe I am quite a good communicator. I would like to say that also landed me where I am today. But I was able to promote the organization in various areas that I worked. And one thing I quickly realized as well is the need to network and mention and work with different people in your organization and outside. I worked with Elizabeth and Norma quite often, and these ladies really also inspired me to be able to be confident to speak to various audiences in various capacities. And I mention you, Elizabeth, because I was at a DIRCO meeting the other day where your book was mentioned again, and it's always nice to hear that, oh, that's my former boss. It's very cool about that. So one thing I learned while working at Sire and CAS was the power, like I mentioned, of networking, ensuring you have a seat at the table, but also with something relevant to say. I don't believe as young people, we should just be pushing for seats at tables and to listen into policy conversation. I think it's also important you take the responsibility amongst yourselves to do the research, to do the hard work, because information is readily available. That's very much how I found out about the Sire CAS scholarship in the first place. And during this time, I developed a deeper interest for foreign policy. And coincidentally, I met colleagues at the Swiss embassy during, I think it was the second careers evening I organized. Yeah, there were quite a few in 2017. I didn't know if they were hiring at that point, but their foreign policy interest in Africa is what drew me, specifically gender equality, climate change, and peace and security. So I reached out and via email, I just basically asked, are you guys hiring? And I didn't know in what capacity they would be able to accept me with the types of qualifications that I had. And the lesson here is don't be afraid to try. That was a great experience. It turned out quite positively. And I've had many successful outreaches since then. But this has not been all a glorious story, like I've mentioned. I can't count on my hands the number of times I've sent out my CVs, I've sent out job requests and not had that feedback. And it can be discouraging. It can be sometimes worrying if you're in the right space. So what I really also encourage is to build a community. So build a community within experts of an organization where you work, perhaps with your families, with your friends, or even with therapists. I think it's quite important. At the Swiss Embassy, like I mentioned, I was exposed to humanitarian diplomacy and the importance of empowering women at all levels in all sectors. I credit my mentors during that time for pushing and challenging me to work on interests, encouraging me where I succeeded, but also failed. I think important lessons are learned when you fail. And like my colleague said, I was a fresh graduate, only having worked mainly in research papers, and now I had to consult on a foreign policy document for a national country. I thought to myself, well, where do I start? I went on Google, I think is how to do foreign policy. And yeah. So the power as well of technology. And I don't believe in coincidences. I was introduced to colleagues where I work now at the Icrc when we co-hosted an event on women, peace, and security. I was immediately drawn to all their stuff. Their genuine care for people, their love for the neighbor, the communities where they work, and the impact in so many lives that often goes unnoticed. I applied after seeing an open position on their LinkedIn, their UN career site, as well as their main website. And what felt like after an eternity of intensive round of interviews, I was successful and got the job. But now I'd like to play a short video, I think that can better encapsulate what the Icrc is, and then I'll talk about my role specifically.
Oh, they say, are you a doctor? No, I tell them, I'm not a doctor. We do have doctors and nurses, although that's just one part of what we do. So what do you do? They ask. Well, have you heard of the Geneva Conventions? Of course, said one guy, but what does it mean in real terms? And I thought for a minute and then I said, it means that whenever there's an armed conflict, we can be there to help. It means that the people who've had to flee their homes because of fighting can have access to clean, drinkable water and food. It means that children who were separated from their families in conflict areas can be reunited with them again. It means that when visiting detainees, we try to ensure they are kept according to international standards, with dignity and without fear of ill treatment. And how do you do all that? He asked. Well, my more than 13,000 colleagues operate in more than 80 countries around the world. But we don't do it alone. We work together with the national societies of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. Our activities can take us deep into urban centers or out to remote rural areas. Our impartiality, independence, and neutrality allow us to touch upon highly sensitive topics. Much of this work we actually do in peacetime. But then, armed conflict creates so many new kinds of needs, many of them not immediately visible, such as for psychosocial support, protection against sexual violence, or education on the dangers of anti-personnel mines. We work together with the people we assist, helping them improve their own livelihoods. So whatever their past, they have a future to look forward to. That is humanity in action.
Thank you for that. So in a nutshell, as you've seen, that the Icrc work is broad in humanitarian assistance. Specifically, my role in a nutshell is resource mobilization. So what that means is engaging with the private sector and non-traditional public and government actors that can assist in co-creating solutions to humanitarian assistance in areas where we work. And this is done regionally through this delegation. As an African, I want to work to see more Africans, not only within these organizations, but bring in innovative projects to help solve issues on the continent, where actually over 70% of our Icrc operations take place. As we can support this, we can also work with trusted organizations like the Icrc and utilize our neutrality and being able to work in conflict areas where many organizations do not have that opportunity. In regards to technology, as a humanitarian organization, we have had to adapt. We are increasingly offering digital services to affected populations. Our RedSafe app, an excellent innovation app that protects people's important documents as they flee from conflict and other situations of violence. My colleague is also here from the South Africa National Red Cross, and they did quite a lot of work during the floods in KZN, as well as restoring family links and making sure that people are able to store these documents on the app. So I encourage you all to download the RedSafe app. The Icrc has increased its digital footprint with new opportunities to become more efficient, such as providing drone supplies in humanitarian areas, as well as accountability. As mentioned, we are a neutral organization that speaks to all actors and takes no political sides. And for me personally, technology has also changed the way I'm able to build on partnerships in both the private and public sector, who work not only in South Africa, but the region at large. Again, the idea is to create innovative partnerships to provide financial and other technical support to affected countries. To reduce our carbon footprint, digital meetings have made it easier to connect. But like you saw in the video, a lot of the sensitivity of the areas that we work, face-to-face engagement remains quite important. And if I just may leave you with some advice before I close off, you should not only ask what your community can do for you, but what can you do for your community? Do not be afraid of change. Take advantage of new software platforms that allow you to work anywhere. Just because you studied law does not mean you can't work for a software company. Whether you find yourself in private, public, or a completely new sector to your goals, this could be your educators and your family and your therapists, like I mentioned, that you build that community and have this important structure in place. It can be discouraging, as mentioned, when things are slow or opportunities are not outlined the way you would like. However, I think it's important to also work on building communities, finding new hobbies, finding out your new passions, and trying to learn a new skill, and especially digital skills like we've mentioned before. The main thing is also to be confident in yourself and the power that lies within, and not be afraid to take risks. Reaching out to organizations, asking whether or not they have opportunities. I had done that with so many, and it comes out positively. Sometimes you reach interview stage, and at some stages it does not. However, I think the lesson there is also experience. Technology is also unbiased, so it is our responsibility to utilize it to help correct issues like gender inequality and other diversity issues. For the Icrc, you can find all our employment opportunities on www.icrc.org. And these are completely global opportunities, not just for our Pretoria regional delegation, but also the type of work you're able to do anywhere in the world based on your type of skills. Do not compromise your ethics for short-term gains or what may look like attractive benefits. The part of creating a better world for those who come after us is ensuring we remain upright in our approach to all humanity. And also remember, your path does not have to look like mine or anyone else's that we've said here. And I really remember this from my parents teaching me about integrity and dignity and the ability to explore. I know people in the private sector or government who have capacity to transform our world. So these are also options that are available to you. You do not need your traditional social sciences route to make a difference. Do it wherever you are. And like I mentioned earlier, through innovation. And may I leave you with my absolute favorite African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.
Thank you, Matebe, and you've just reinforced again for me the value of investing in people. It's just so amazing for us. I think I'll share yourself, Kaylee, Cynthia, people who've gone through our doors have gone on to such great things. So thank you. Dr. Dix, I'm going to ask you to make closing remarks after we do the questions, if that's okay. We've had quite a number of questions. I'm going to open it also to the floor. They're coming in thick and fast. There were a few practical questions. So somebody said, is an undergrad bachelor's degree adequate to get your foot in the door, or is honors or masters the minimum requirement? Are these internships paid for, and when will applications open? So applications will be on our website on the 15th of August, and you'll have about 6 weeks to apply. It'll close at the end of October. End of September, and then there will be a series of interviews. And we'd like to try and get the process done as soon as possible, because people have to make decisions about what they're going to do. For the internship, it's a very rare occasion that we allowed somebody to do a master's. So generally, you will have to have done your honors. And then what happens is the internship actually also pays for your studies for that year at WITS or at UJ or in Cape Town at UCT or Stellenbosch. So the minimum requirement is an honors generally, unless there's a special case made. And are they paid? Yes, they are paid, but it's not a fortune. You will get a small monthly stipend, which will cover some of your expenses, but you're not going to get rich from the internship. Okay. Then to Matebe, here's a question. Does the ICRC work with demographers or population scientists? You can tackle that one.
Demographers or population scientists? Yes, we do. Like I mentioned, we do not discriminate on the type of background that you have. We have medical experts, we have forensic experts. So it really depends, like I mentioned, on the need at the moment. I need to be clear to mention that our mandate is to work in conflict countries and affected. We are in South Africa because we consider this an operational delegation to be able to reach out throughout the rest of the region. However, you do not need an only humanities degree to work for the ICRC. More and more, they're also taking on external applicants from completely new fields, especially in the area of software development. And like I mentioned, I would really encourage you to visit our website. It is updated quite regularly, as we have over 18,000 employees, and posts and opportunities are posted throughout the world. So it won't just be limited to what's available in South Africa, but where the need is. So I hope that answers that.
Thanks. I'm going to take two more of these that have been passed to me from the internet, and then we'll open it up to the audience, and then we'll see what our time looks like. I'm not sure who wants to tackle this one, but are there programs in place that seek to train young scholars to be digitally literate in relation to career development objectives in international studies? Maybe Barent, you might want to tackle that one.
I don't think I'm the right person for this. From a scholar perspective, I can tell you there's lots of open courses in data science that I can recommend. But no, I think somebody else can take this one.
Okay. Yeah, that's a question to be asking, I guess, the universities. But yeah, there's a lot out there. Kaylee, is that something that you maybe can tackle?
I don't particularly have anything to add. I don't know of any programs that are specific to scholars of IR, but like Barent mentioned, there are so many courses available for free online, and I think it's up to the individual really to research some of those options.
Reminds me of the bad joke that my friends, when I started studying and I wanted to do humanities and a BA, and my friends who were all doing commerce or law said, you know, what do you say to a BA graduate? And the answer is, can I have fries with that, please? Can I have, you know, so that they're going to be working in McDonald's. There's nothing wrong with working in McDonald's. But you know, we're in an era where you have to make your own opportunities. You have to take the ones that are presented, but you also have to take responsibility to forge your own career.
And exactly what you said, Stephen. So the Icrc also does not offer these programs, but what I can also recommend, and I think this is my experience as the public and private ship manager, is reach out to corporate sector. A lot of corporates also have social impact funds, social impact traineeships, and opportunities where they want to upskill young people. And I think more and more we do not take advantage of, for example, MTN has an MTN Foundation, and I don't know the exact requirements based on the qualifications, but those are other avenues you're able to explore. So I know the bias sometimes is only to reach out to research institutes, to embassies, which is also great, humanitarian organizations. But I think more and more, as the world seems to be getting smaller as well with digitalization, despite the digital divide, you can still reach out to the private sector and explore opportunities, especially on their website. They're pretty up to date on what they offer to graduates or students alike.
Thank you. Byron, maybe for you, what about the Fourth Industrial Revolution undermining human creativity? And a related question, how do we reconcile the fast-paced technologies within the labor market paradigm shift from static work to more high-end corporatism? So how this kind of changing world of work?
Yeah, the one on creativity I really like. I mean, in AI at the moment, they are creating, I don't know if you've seen GPT-3 and DALL-E 2. It's like a machine learning algorithm that's creating art. And the question there is, can a computer create art? And it seems like, yes, it can create a certain type of art, but it needs human curation to really make it special. And that's the same thing I'm finding in our industry. The machines, as this industrial revolution is going ahead, the machines can get you this far, but they're still really stupid when you ask them the hard questions. And that is where creativity and human art comes in, and the expertise that you build up in a career in the industry or through universities and studying, it takes off. So I think, and that's our whole company is built around this idea that you get at the intersection of the industrial revolution, where you make humans do what they do best, and you make machines do what they do best, and that is where you find efficiency, and human creativity makes that efficiency more effective.
I mean, it reminds me of when you Google Translate something. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable how good these translations happen in a single second, but then also sometimes how really bad they don't understand what they're translating. So there's never going to, hopefully there's never going to be a
Hi, everyone. So my name is Mbali. I'm an honors student in demography and population studies here at Wits University. So I was gonna ask, right, you know how US government in the US, they have approval ratings for presidents, obviously informed by polls. So I wanted to ask, do you think the South African government has something like that, where they're in touch with how people on the ground feel about governance? Because, and if they don't, how can we use technology to kind of like bridge that gap? Because 3 days ago, I think the ANC had the ANC policy conference, and a lot of people, so there were different views, and views came up where people felt that the ANC is not in touch with what's happening on the ground based on their policies, you know, and the policies didn't look at implementation. They didn't self-reflect, and they also didn't try and figure out what is it that people want. So my question is on technology. How can we use technology to kind of like, you know, bridge the gap and make people's views and grievances more accessible at a government level, even at a municipal level or provincial level? So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I like to just do questions one at a time so that they don't get too lost. So Kaylee, I don't know if you want to have a crack at the technology governance interface. If I've taught you anything, you can answer this question.
Sure. So there's definitely some organizations that are looking at this. The Afrobarometer is one that immediately comes to mind. Ipsos also does a survey monthly, actually, on what worries the world, and it includes data from several African countries. I think the problem, though, is that I don't know how seriously this question is taken up by government. And something that's really worried me over the last couple of months is the defunding of institutional and really critical government departments like Stats SA, to the extent that even some of the statistics we're getting on unemployment, the credibility of those are now coming under question. So that is definitely a challenge and something that I think that government should be investing more in.
Thanks, Kaylee. So this young lady over here, and then the gentleman at the back.
Can I jump in very quick?
Yes, sure.
There's also a company called GovChat that you can check out. They do really good work. They do they have an app that you can go and say responses or how you feel about the government. Really good app.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Rebecca Cabello. I'm doing my master's in sociology. So I wanted to understand if the internship is only for MA students, or if you want to pursue your PhD, you can still apply for the internship scholarship.
So I think the short answer is no, but we will consider, I don't know, would we consider doctorates? It's not really designed for that. It's, yeah. So yeah, it's a one-year program, so it wouldn't be appropriate for doctoral studies. Noema?
If you are a PhD scholar or you're enrolled in a PhD, we would be very interested to hear from you, because we do commission work very, very frequently and like to actually work with young researchers. Okay.
Gentleman at the back.
Good
Just
afternoon.
wait for the mic to arrive.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Tiamo Modise. I'm currently studying law. This is my final year. I did BA in International Relations and Political Science. So my first question is that I would like to ask, with regards to the scholarship, does it cover for accommodation?
No.
Oh, okay.
It does?
Yes,
it does cover your accommodation. Oh, okay. Not very well informed.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much,
so
Steve.
it does fees and accommodation.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Steve. The second question is to Matebe. I just want to know, with regards when she approaches the private sector, what are the challenges? Because some of the private sector companies, they might not want to fund, some they might fund late. I don't know. May you please share the challenges with regards to that? Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. And you know, I always try to look at something not as a challenge, but as an obstacle we can overcome. So perhaps I would say some of the obstacles I would find is them not understanding the work of the Icrc and how it might link with their own social impact work. And that's where I come in. And I want to bridge the gap more and more, not only with the private sector, but other entities, to show that, you know, humanitarian assistance and activeness has been a part of our African culture for hundreds of years. So with private sector, I also try to create linkages with the type of work that the company might be doing. And I think that also helps them understand why they should support the Icrc. And at the end of the day, I think it's also important to be prepared and do your research about the company you're approaching. I can't speak for the whole private sector because, as you know, in South Africa, it's quite diverse and large. But what I can say is, when you are approaching, for example, I speak on forensics because this is one of our programs, a forensic company, I will do my research on the countries they work in, on the type of forensic activities they fund or partner with. And I think also it's important to go to the private sector, not just with problems, but especially as young people, innovative ideas that they can partner with that can move forward in that. So these have been some obstacles, but by and large, I do find them open to engage, especially in a post-COVID era. I think a lot of companies have realized there's much more they can do towards supporting communities and creating sustainabilities within countries. So also just don't be afraid. I always say the worst answer you will get is a no. Sometimes they do give you feedback as to why it doesn't work out or not. But I would always say, take the first step, be confident, do your research, be prepared, and don't look at it as an obstacle, but how you can partner with that particular company.
So here's a question for you that came through online. But because you've done this, what is the best way of standing out to a potential employer who's not advertised a vacancy?
The best way to stand out, for me and my personal experience, I literally have, I used to have a list of organizations I thought I would want to work with. I would find an email. I would find perhaps an HR email as well. I would send my CV. I would send a letter of confidence. I would incorporate why I think I would be good for the role. And I would also ask if they don't have opportunities at the moment, can they keep me in their database for a while? And I know we speak of a special Kassai relationship that led to that 2-year, but I want to also focus that I did a 4-year degree in the US. And so that's why I was able to justify that extra support. So for me, it has always been not waiting to hear on LinkedIn or through friends or through communities what's available, although that's always good and helpful, but also doing the work yourself. I know in a digital age, this is not always realistic, especially those who might not have access to internet data, but also utilize campuses, utilize cities of Pretoria, of Johannesburg, where you do know that they have internet spots. Do your research, don't be afraid to send out your CV, your letter of interest, and also to keep on the database. And also don't be afraid to do the grunt work, guys. I mean, yeah, sometimes when I was in the US, I worked for a company, I was making coffees, running around printing shirts, but it opened me up to a different world and what else I'm able to do with my skills. So I think outreach is very important from your side. Thanks.
That's that. Yes, you're sure, with pleasure.
Yes, I just want to add, make a very important point that Mateba has raised, but I want to emphasize it. Never underestimate the importance of spending a lot of time on writing your letter of confidence or your letter of motivation. You know, we're on the receiving end of lots of applications. Our advert always asks for a letter of motivation. How many CVs do you think I receive that have letters of motivation? Very few. Okay. It is so critical, guys, because that's your first pitch. I've just come out of a series of interviews in Pretoria. There were some good letters of motivation. They draw the letter draws your attention to why this candidate wants the job, why the candidate thinks they are qualified for the job, how they understand the company. So doing the research about the company or the institution or whatever, And it doesn't have to be long. It's just one page. But that attracts you as an employer, the ability to see that this person has written well, has actually researched and understands the job, and basically puts themselves out there as to why, they have applied and why they think they can do the job. And it also forces you to focus on the skills that you have that are relevant to the job. So guys, if there's one thing that you take out of here today, it's do a proper letter of motivation or letter of confidence. It goes a long way. It's never judge a book by its cover, but people do. And that covering letter is critical.
It's worth spending time on your CV, that it doesn't have spelling mistakes, that it's well laid out, because as Elizabeth said, we look at sometimes hundreds of these things and you go to the bottom of the pile. So those are two probably of the most critical things you're ever going to write in your life, your CV and your letter of motivation. So somebody's asked if the internship can be done over 2 years. Generally not. It's a calendar year, and it starts from 1st of February and ends on the 30th of November each year. So no, you can't do it over 2 years. Are there more questions from the audience or comments? Yes, this young lady over here.
My name is Delifa. I'm doing my honors in sociology. My question is for the CADS program. I want to ask if they have opportunities for youngsters who want to engage in maybe research and publications, if they can involve them maybe in research, not specifically if they are not taken for internship programs, but if they want to volunteer and maybe learn from the organization. Thank you.
So maybe Cynthia or Dr. Dix could respond. But you've said one of the most important words as well is volunteer. Sometimes you have to invest in your own career, and maybe nobody likes to do stuff for nothing, but sometimes it's worth getting that bit of experience by volunteering in whatever sphere it is, because you're building your brand, you're building yourself, and people will say, if this is somebody who's never done anything for the community or they've only studied, they're not a well-rounded person. I think, volunteering, sometimes you have to take that. There's so many ways to volunteer in the world. Sometimes it's an investment in your CV. Dr. Dix, I don't know if you had any comments on that question.
No, that
Yes.
sounds good. Well, thank you. Yeah, we CAS offers internships in our offices in Johannesburg and in Cape Town and in many other cities in Africa and worldwide. So I can encourage you to apply for an internship. But being a candidate for an internship requires the same attitude as just what Elizabeth said about seriousness when you write your letters and so on. I can tell you that we are receiving a lot of requests. And when you apply for a job or for an internship, don't expect your future employer investing half an hour to read your paper. They will not. That would be unusual. Think that he has maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes to get the first impression, and the first impression is always very important. And the other thing I'd like to recommend, especially when it comes to getting in contact with a political foundation like Konrad Adenauer Foundation, we cannot work with people who are sitting in their home the whole day reading only books. We want to work with people who are going out, who participate in events like this. This is a wonderful way to meet people, to get in contact with people. I know many cases where the first contact with a future employee of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation or a future fellow was not via a formal request, but we met somewhere and they got interested. I'm interested in what you're doing, and then you meet them a second time, a third time. So obviously this person is interested in what we do, and that is a very good way of getting in contact with organizations and allowing them to have an impression about you, which sometimes is even more important than the one you can give, the impression you can give on a letter or on even on a motivation letter. Yeah. So please, what I can recommend you, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation is quite active on the social media. We have young people like Cynthia. They always push me to be very active on the social media. See what we are doing. When you see that there's an activity that might be of interest, go meet people. Extremely important.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to ask a question from the audience? Yes, over there.
Thank you. My name is Precious Mahali. I am a master's student. I have a question for the gentleman. Yeah. I just want to find out like what job opportunities do you have for graduates? And in your presentation, you mentioned that you use technical tools to, for example, with your thesis to measure democracy, right? As someone who's applying, is it required for me to be familiar with the technical tools that you use in your company? Or is there some sort of training that you offer to graduates? And the question is, what technical tools do you use? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So the first question, yes, there's opportunities. We have job openings all the time. And like I mentioned, we have basically two tracks in the company. There's analysts, which is more traditional political scientists. And then there's data scientists, which is data science and programming. It helps to have a bit of data skills, but it's not a necessity. We also have a very good internship program that's been running for, we've had 3 rounds so far. And from the internships that we've run, we hire about 80% of the people coming in. They're very competitive and they're well paid. But for them, it's a benefit. And I would say if you have any interest in on the technical side, courses on introduction to data science, Python, R, programming languages, just those introduction courses can, I think for the CVs also, what you can look at a website of a company, they'll give you cheat codes. Like they have little keywords on there. And like if you throw into our stuff, data science and programming and Python, like we look for those keywords and all companies do that. But yeah, not a necessity, but it helps.
I've also been asked to mention and talk a little bit about the Youth at Sire program that we have here, especially for those of you on campus. We have a very well-established and very exciting, innovative Youth at Sire program that does things from Model United Nations to a Young Leaders Conference. You can get all the details on the website, but it's another area where you might have a path for things that interest you, especially in the international relations field. So if you're looking out for getting involved, particularly if you still got time left at university, that it's also something that we want to mention. Yes, at the back again.
I'll stop to ask lots of questions, but like this one's the last one. Good afternoon again, beautiful people. My first question goes to Parent. So I'd like to ask that, have you ever took your company to maybe disadvantaged backgrounds like villages and townships to expand and get more innovation ideas? And the second one goes to Matebe. You said something about SADC passport, according to you, I'd like to know as an IR scholar, what delays a SADC passport, especially from Zambia going down to South Africa and other countries?
Okay,
thank you so much.
Good questions. Thank you. Lawrence, and then.
So I love that question. So I guess I want to approach it from two perspectives. The one is we do population-centric intelligence, and I think a lot of our clients, we work in government and private industry and NGO industry. A lot of the questions are, when I do X policy, does it actually have a good impact? And what do the people on the ground think about that? And a big part of our work is trying to answer the question. So if it's going to affect a rural community, how do you actually listen if they like what you're doing there? And a big effort on our side is, so in some areas, like we talk about the digital thing, but radio is really where the conversation is happening, in WhatsApp and local newspapers and things like that. So we focus a lot on trying to listen to the where the voice is coming from and who's actually being affected. But I know that's not your question. Your question is, can we pull insights and ideas from then? I think yes. I don't know exactly how to do that, but I'd love to explore that. So if you're interested to come help me.
Yes, I am. That will be so great. Thank you so much for that.
It's a very interesting question for a neutral organization I work for. I cannot claim to understand the political reasons what is delaying on the passports. I think our AU youth representative might have more insight than myself. But like I said, the Icrc is a regional delegation in Southern Africa. And quite freely, we have been able to work across communities in areas that, like I mentioned, no other organizations are able to go because our mandate is to work in conflict countries. So when you mention a delay in SADC, we don't see it in our work. Actually, what we would want to see is more engagement with other donors, innovative partners who are represented in the Southern Africa region. There's quite a lot of companies, there's quite a lot of other governments involved. And I do believe that the interest and drive is there to continue working on humanitarian assistance. But as I mentioned for the passport, I think our representative might have more insight than I do. But being a SADC person myself, I can say, you know, I've never had a problem traveling in the region. I've grown up throughout all these countries. They have influenced my experiences, my culture, my love for people, my love to work in communities with humanity. And I think if you have an interest in working in humanitarian areas, I really think you have to be open as well to assimilating with different peoples and cultures and accepting that despite these differences, at the end of the day, we are all human. We all want the same things: to end poverty, to make sure that our communities have dignity and are prosperous and have access to resources. So I hope that answers a bit of your question. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I think part of the problem is that countries don't want to give up their hard-won sovereignty. And that migration issues are, you know, we talk about integration on the continent, but when it comes to sharing something like that, I think there's a lack of political will, unfortunately. I've had a couple of technical questions. Somebody said some people have had to work and only go back to their studies a little bit later in life. Do we consider older candidates? And I think the answer would be yes. It depends on the strength of your application. But it's not usual to have older scholars, but it's not impossible. So you're encouraged to do so. And then some, as long as you're under 30. Okay, so that's the criterion. And then there was also a question about whether somebody from a discipline like engineering could apply. I mean, there's nothing to stop you applying, but generally we look at international relations, law, politics, economics, and cognate disciplines in the humanities. It's this particular, you know, it's the internship can't be everything to everybody. We do need criteria. So I think, Dr. Dix, I'm going to hand over to you for some final words, unless there are any more pressing questions. Yes, sir, at the back. Sorry about that. And then we'll close.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Chigwenya, sociologist, researcher, and student development practitioner. My question is for Barend. Are there any security risks that your employees face? And if there are, do you warn or sit down your potential or prospective employees that, listen, given that we're in the political security space, these are some of the risks that you might need to be aware of, not only in terms of yourself, but then targets to your family. And I'm saying this in light of, even in your presentation, when you were doing work in the US after Trump's election, you know, being targeted with the organization. And then also just to connect with the question that the lady asked earlier on, who does a master's, I think, in demography, in the demography department with regards to the ANC? I mean, given our country in this context with regards to, political killings. So it would be interesting. Yeah, I'd like to find out from you in terms of like employee risk, in terms of working for your company. Thanks.
Such a good question. And it's like that question is so close to my heart because it's so important. We work in security. So yes, there are risks and we make it very clear in our induction program to employees what type of risks they're facing. The other part of it is also you choose your clients and the types of projects that you take on very carefully. We are very happy to say no to certain projects if we think it would have a risk for employees. We work in open source. I think that's a big part of making it safer. So a lot of companies in our industry goes over to the clandestine side and like have people on the ground. We don't do that at all. It's desk work, and you do research like that. On the question of the demography, and I think I got the question is, would we hire people with that degree? No.
Just to get a bit of
Yeah.
context. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, there are risks. And yes, we do work through them with our employees. But it's something you have to constantly look at. And yeah, we have a whole department that works on that.
Norma? Yes. Yes. So Kaylee knows that whenever she was in a meeting with me, there was always a time when I would say, Kaylee, what do you think? So Kaylee, what do you think?
No, I was just thinking about Africa Check's policies around this, and it's the same. I mean, we work largely from our computers, so the risk is probably not as big as with Voxcroft, but trolls are very real. I have woken up to death threats in my Twitter inbox, and I think these are risks that you face when you work in industries like this, but definitely something that we offer a lot of support for, and that risks that are made clear when researchers take on this kind of work.
Right, thank you. Dr. Dix, who I didn't introduce at the beginning because he wasn't here, but now he is. So Dr. Dix is the, let me get the title correct, acting head of the regional program Political Dialogue Sub-Saharan Africa at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation office in South Africa. A great supporter of Sire over very many years, and we've built up a wonderful partnership. And some closing remarks from you, what you might have said at the beginning or your reflection of what you've heard. And then I'll do a few thank yous and then we'll close for the day. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll do that from here. Is that okay? Yeah. First of all, I have to excuse myself for the fact that I was not. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. So first of all, I have to present my excuses for the fact that I was not here in the beginning. I planned to be with you from the beginning, but then I had to do something which is very much linked to what you discussed here. I had to exercise some influence on decision makers in Pretoria. And in this case, it was not possible to do it in a digital way. I had to touch them. And it took a little bit longer than I thought, but now I'm here, and I'm pretty sure that Cynthia, who did the opening for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, did a very good job. Now, I do not know what she said in the beginning. There might be the risk that I'm repeating now what she said, but first of all, my title is not really correct. I'll give the correct title. I'm the acting director of the country program of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And the new director of the country program, Mr. Gregor, he arrived this morning at the airport, so I had to pick him up, and with him I went to Pretoria. I'm the director. I'm still the acting director of the country program, but I'm the director of a new program called Political Dialogue with and within Sub-Saharan Africa. And the idea of this program is to create a dialogue between people like you in Sub-Saharan Africa on important political issues. The idea is to create a network of think tanks like Sire and others, which partly already exists, Stephen doesn't know, but to strengthen the think tank network in Africa in order to strengthen the African voice for example, in Europe. And we are promoting young people like you via fellowships and others. Now, I'm really happy to be back at Sire today. I was the resident representative of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in South Africa between 2012 and 2016. And we had the careers days every year, sometimes, packed. We had people like outside, they were standing outside to follow this event. And this was one of the events where I always said as Kassai's rep, that was a good one. Sometimes we are doing things where we're not sure whether it was good or not, but this thing, I always said it was a very good event. So I'm really happy that we are still doing it. And I'm even more happy that the Konrad Adenauer Foundation decided that our cooperation with Sire left the country program and it's now in my program. So I'm allowed to be still in contact with you. I do not want to give a long speech now, but what I experience quite often when I talk to young people like you, and we speak about international relations, foreign policy, quite often they would say, it is a complicated topic. I don't like it. It's complicated. It's far away. It's nothing that has an impact on you. And I think what is very important now these days, and I think that is why you have done this activity and why you have chosen the topic. These days, today, we feel how important developments in regions far away from your own place are on your own life. The example, I mean, you all know the example of the Russian aggression now in Ukraine. The impact that has on Africa is enormous. And you will feel it in your job, in East Africa, for example, and not only in East Africa. So there should be a huge interest, not only for young people, but especially for young people, to think about international relations, to think about how you can have a positive influence on the international relation, to follow what your own country thinks about and does about international relations, how your government is acting, for example. I think you should have an interest in doing that, and why not opting for kind of an international engagement in a non-governmental organization, in a university, or maybe even as a job later at DIRCO or somewhere else. So again, I would like to say that I'm really happy to see, I mean, we're here now, how many, 70, 80 people? I saw 100 people, more or less 100 are following. That is a very good result. I do hope that COVID will be over soon and that we can pack this room with 150 people again to discuss these beautiful things. I'm happy to see Matebe. I still remember the meeting we had. I'm not sure whether it was so long. You felt it was very long. Yeah, because my questions were tough. It was not too long, but she answered quite good. Again, so please feel free to get in contact with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Sire is always a beautiful partner for you, but have a look at our website as well. Check if there are things you might be interested in. Join us. And I forgot to say it when I was asked what one should do in order to get in contact and have an internship. The best thing you can write in a motivation letter is that, Mr. Dix, I participated last week in an activity of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Now I'm expecting next week hundreds of letters, starting with this. But this is the best way. That is the best way. So thank you again, and all the best for you, for your career, for your future career. Thanks for our experts and to Sire. It was good meeting you again. Thank you.
So Dr. Dix, I'm going to walk out of this room and say, that was a good one. So just it remains for me to close off. I want to just pay tribute to our team of CAS scholars, Laura Rubbage, Kendra Connick, Jordan McLean, Danielle Murray, and Lita Nzinyati, the last two from Cape Town. Amazing work you guys put into this event. Thank you. It really was a good one, and I know what Dr. Dix has talked about. You get that feeling when there's an emotional connection, or when it really hits the mark. And I think fantastic work that you guys have done. A big thank you to Sire's communications and events teams for this. The scholars asked me to thank you, Noima, and the coordinator of the scholarship program, Ketiwe. And just to say, please follow us on social media. The announcement of the opening of the Kassai Scholarship will be made on the 15th of August, and you'll have 6 weeks to apply. Put some effort into it if it's something that interests you, and I wish you all safe travels, and amazingly, we finished on time. See, it is possible. Thank you very much. You can join us for some refreshments outside. Thank you. And thanks, speakers. I didn't thank you, but